There has never been a separate you. That is the oldest illusion, the idea that a fragile little person is reaching out toward some distant God. This belief built churches, empowered governments, and turned life into an endless search. Joel Goldsmith called it the original mistake. There are not two sides, only one reality, God, expressing himself in countless forms. Just as glass can become a cup, a jar, or a window, but always remains glass, so it is with consciousness. Consciousness is whole, indivisible, without limits. What we call sickness, lack, or suffering has no true essence. They are mirages, like train tracks that only appear to meet at the horizon. Perfection is not a promise for the future, it already exists here and now. And this is exactly what you are not supposed to see. Because if the illusion falls, the whole mechanism collapses, churches lose their purpose, governments lose fear as their currency, and economies built on scarcity lose their foundation. There is no distance to travel, nothing to win. Only the recognition that what sees, breathes, and lives has always been divine, appearing as the individual. You are not human. This statement feels unsettling because it shakes the very foundation of identity, the one the entire world accepts as obvious. From early childhood, we are taught that a human being is a biological accident, destined for decay and death. But this is not true. The thing we call I is only a distortion, a cloudy lens hiding reality. Consciousness perceiving itself is not separate, it is God in expression. Joel Goldsmith, the American mystic of the 20th century, unmasked this illusion again and again. He said, "There is no mortal cut off from God, there is only infinite life manifesting as individual expression." His revelation became known as the infinite way. And this is not religion. Not dogma. Not another congregation of believers. It is a direct experience of unity, available to anyone willing to pierce the veil of ordinary perception. But the world is designed to keep the illusion alive. Religious institutions have long painted God as distant and unreachable. Science has reduced identity to atoms and brain signals. Culture has taught us to see life as a struggle for survival against disease, crises, and limitations. This collective construct has kept humanity enslaved to fear, desire, and the endless search outside for what already exists in fullness within. And here lies the paradox: despite all our efforts toward healing, progress, and transformation, none of it is truly necessary. Perfection is already present. Suffering, sickness, and lack are not real forces to fight against. They are distortions of perception, like train tracks that only seem to converge in the distance. Pain may be felt, but it has no independent reality. The error lies not in being itself, but in how it is seen. This revelation carries disruptive power. If all disharmony is illusion, what happens to the systems that profit from promises of healing, evolution, or future salvation? If separation never existed, what is the role of structures that place themselves as mediators between humanity and God? The infinite way challenges not only personal beliefs but the very foundation of civilization. To uncover its secret, one must pass through 6 movements, each one dissolving part of the illusion. The first unmasks the root error, the belief in men as separate from the divine source. The second revisits the historical and philosophical roots that fueled this vision of separation, from religion to mysticism. The third movement reaches the heart of the message, the absolute unity of God and man. The metaphor of glass and vessel shows that there was never distance, only forms of one substance. The fourth gathers the pillars of the teaching, spiritual healing that dissolves illusions, the power of the word as a revolution of the present moment, and the recognition of disharmony as illusion. These disarm the mind's deception. The fifth movement reveals the practical consequences. What changes when you realize there is nothing to conquer, that all is already whole? How does this shift your relationship with the body, with time, even with the spiritual search itself? The sixth movement is the call. It is not enough to understand intellectually. One must pierce the veil through direct experience. Meditation becomes the only practice capable of revealing the presence that already is, and dissolving the illusion once and for all. On this journey, uncomfortable questions arise. If perfection is already the state of being, who is it that suffers? If there is no separation, who is it that seeks God? These are not riddles but sharp instruments, cutting through the prison of belief. This is knowledge that can be tested in practice, without intermediaries, without promises of a future, without bargaining with the divine. It is a spiritual science, inviting you to see what has always been here. You were never human. Humanity is the mask. Divinity is the face. And through this crack, the light of the infinite way shines in. The belief that man is separate from God did not arise by chance. It was cultivated for thousands of years, becoming the invisible lens through which civilization sees existence. To grasp how the illusion was built is essential to understand the depth of the revolution the infinite way proposes. Religious traditions always portrayed God as external, transcendent, beyond reach. In ancient Judaism, connection to the divine was mediated by priests and strict laws. In institutional Christianity, the distance only grew. Christ was turned into a savior to be worshipped, while his own words, "I and the Father are one," were reduced to an exception instead of a universal revelation. Islam, with its emphasis on submission, reinforced the radical distance between creation and creator. But the vision of separation extended beyond religion. Western philosophy too embedded this split. From Plato's perfect forms against the imperfect material world, to Augustine and Aquinas building theology on this duality. Later, Descartes sealed the divide with mind versus body, a mental structure that still dominates science today. Man became a machine, reducible to parts, stripped of spirit. And though the details differed, all pointed to the same lie, that life is a constant attempt to reach God, health, wholeness, always in the future, never here. In the East, some traditions glimpsed what the West lost. Vedanta in India declared, Atman is Brahman, the soul is one with the Absolute. Mahayana Buddhism shattered the idea of a separate self, revealing emptiness as the core of all phenomena. Taoism spoke of unity with the way. But even there, practice often became ritualized, hiding the original simplicity. Against this background, Joel Goldsmith stands out. He stripped mysticism of rituals, dogmas, and intermediaries. The infinite way is direct experience. The recognition that the power called God is the very consciousness that reads these words, that breathes in this moment. Its radical force lies in the removal of every mediator. Two key insights hold the teaching together. The first, the illusion of separation, what the world calls reality, is only misinterpretation. The second, eternal presence, divine perfection is not a future goal, but the condition here and now. These ideas echo ancient traditions, but Goldsmith speaks with clarity that cuts through speculation. Unlike Neoplatonism's abstractions, he insists unity is not a concept, but the fact of existence itself. Unlike Vedanta's reliance on scripture and gurus, the infinite way denies all outer authority. The only teacher is the direct experience of consciousness in meditation. And this is the decisive point: if disharmony is illusion, then there is nothing in the outer world that needs fixing. This perception undermines not just religion, but the very logic of progress. Entire civilizations have been built on the idea of transforming reality, curing disease, improving life, correcting injustice. Goldsmith does not deny the practical value of these things. But he shows that on the essential level, they do not touch divine reality. Creation is already perfect. What must dissolve is not the problems, but the belief in their reality. This shift makes the infinite way so provocative. Instead of offering comfort or promising rewards, it destroys the very ground of seeking. The way does not move forward, but inward. Not into the future, but into the now. This requires a radical shift in how consciousness perceives itself. Where traditions point outward, Goldsmith points inward. Where culture glorifies outer achievements, he calls attention to the quiet awareness of unity. This shift is so profound, it may at first seem impossible, because it touches the very core of identity, the foundation humanity has been building throughout all of history. And here lies the root of the hidden illusion. The world depends on the belief that you are a separate individual. That belief fuels the turning of the wheel, the health industry, the trade of faith, the logic of production and consumption. But the truth is different. The consciousness hearing these words right now is not striving to reach God, it already is the very expression of the divine. The boldest claim of this teaching is that the individual does not exist as an isolated entity. The awareness that sees, thinks, and breathes does not belong to you in the limited sense. It is divine life itself, manifesting in individual form. Which means, there has never been any real division between creator and creation. Separation existed only as an assumption, a habit of the human mind that sees duality where there is only unity. Think of a glass made from clear crystal. You can describe its shape, its purpose, its function. But at the core, you are only looking at glass in a certain form. Melt it down into a jar or a window, and its essence remains unchanged. Identity works the same way. You may appear with unique traits, with a body and a story, but the substance you are made of is the same, divine life. There is no glass on one side and glasses on the other. No God on one side, and you on the other. The difference is only in appearance. This perspective overturns a historical misunderstanding of Christ's words. When Jesus said, "I and the Father are one," he wasn't declaring a special privilege for himself. He was revealing a universal principle that governs all existence. Turning that truth into an exclusive claim only deepened the illusion of distance, tricking generations into searching for what was never missing. And this is not theory. It is a complete reversal in the way life is understood. When a person believes God is out there, a sense of lack immediately arises. One must ask, wait, try to earn. Daily life becomes organized around this feeling of deficiency. But when a person realizes that consciousness itself is divine expression, the need for pleading disappears. Prayer changes its nature. It is no longer petition, it becomes silence. The individual grows quiet, not to speak, but to recognize the presence already here. This is more than a religious practice. It is a psychological break, dissolving fear, anxiety, and struggle. And its impact is even clearer when it comes to healing. The common view sees healing as a process, something broken that must be fixed, through medicine, psychology, or even spirituality. But if unity is fact, then there was never a real defect. Only the appearance of one, a distorted perception of the mind. True healing happens the instant that appearance is seen as illusion. The body does not transform, only the mistaken belief in disease dissolves. And this is not a metaphor. For Goldsmith, spiritual healing means the disappearance of illusion and the unveiling of perfection that has always been present. This awareness is not an escape, but a recognition. Not a denial of the world, but a refusal to treat it as absolute. At the heart of this teaching is the realization, you have never truly been human in essence. This is not an insult to identity, it is the unveiling of a truth. The limited I has always been a mask. Behind it, there is an indivisible reality, never born, never dying. When this becomes clear, the search ends. The sense of presence replaces the anxiety of distance. There are not two. There have never been two. There is only one, appearing in many forms, but never divided. And this statement, that there is no separation between God and man, reveals its full weight only when its practical consequences are understood. It cannot remain a lofty idea. It must touch lived experience, how we understand healing, prayer, time, and even the very reality of suffering. Here the teaching shows its radical edge, because it undermines everything the ordinary mind takes for granted. Healing is perhaps the clearest example. In everyday life, sickness and pain seem undeniable. Doctors examine the body, give diagnoses, prescribe treatments. None of this is denied as sensory appearance, but the explanation is different. Illness is not an objective reality. It is only an illusion of perception. Just as the human eye sees train tracks converging at the horizon, though they remain parallel, the mind interprets failure or defect where only perfection exists. True healing is not the fixing of bones, not the repair of tissues, not the removal of symptoms. It happens in the very moment when belief in something wrong dissolves. Then the whole, unbroken self is revealed, the self that was never born, never sick, never destined to die. Instantaneous healing is not a gradual process, it is the vanishing of illusion, and the unveiling of the spiritual reality that was always here. The same logic reshapes the nature of prayer. For centuries, humanity has been trained to send words and pleas toward a distant God, hoping for mercy or relief. But this movement began from a mistake, the assumption that there is someone separate, who must persuade an outside power. The revelation that God expresses as every individual shatters this structure. Prayer is no longer about speaking to God, but about being still, perceiving the presence already here. It is not a person addressing God, it is God, shining forth as the person. When this perception becomes clear, the whole dynamic of prayer changes. There is no search for what is missing. There is only recognition of what has always been present. And this perspective feels unsettling to the ordinary mind. If God is already expressing as every person, then the one who seems sick and asks for help is not an imperfect human striving toward perfection. He already is divine life itself, full and complete, only hidden by distorted perception. Healing is not about summoning wholeness. It is about removing the veil of misperception. Prayer adds nothing, it only reveals what has always been. This same principle dissolves the tyranny of time. Human thought projects into the future, one day there will be healing, one day enlightenment, one day harmony. But spiritual truth does not exist in the future. Divine reality can only be experienced in the absolute now. The right verb is not will be, it is. Perfection is not waiting for the right conditions to appear. It already forms the foundation of all existence. To say, God is, life is, harmony is not rhetoric, it is refusal to participate in the illusion of time. Anxiety dissolves, because there is no waiting. The future loses its grip, because nothing can be added to what is already complete. And this recognition flows directly into spiritual practice. The one asking for help does not need something yet to arrive, only clarity of perception of what is already here. True prayer is not transformation, it is witnessing perfection, right now. To be a child of God now means exactly this. Reality is not waiting for symptoms to fade or rituals to succeed. Truth already is. And spiritual practice is simply holding to that awareness. And finally, the realization that crowns all others. What we call disharmony has never had objective reality. Illness, sin, limitation, lack, these are only appearances of illusion. Projections of the mind, like clouds that seem to rest on the mountains, though they never touch them. In this recognition, spiritual healing is complete. There is no struggle with outside forces, no battle against real problems, only the unveiling of illusion. And once illusion is seen, it loses all power. No one has ever truly been harmed by a mistake in perception. A wound exists only as long as we believe appearance is substance. But make no mistake, this is not indifference. Suffering can be felt sharply, yet it is not allowed to stand as absolute. The spiritual practitioner does not deny pain, but places it in perspective, refusing to grant it authority. The secret lies in cultivating deep conviction that the problem is nothing but an image of illusion. This is not an intellectual exercise, it is a living practice, one that dissolves error and makes space for harmony to shine through. The four aspects, healing that dissolves illusion, the word that removes duality, awareness that dissolves time, and the recognition of disharmony's unreality, are not separate parts. They are interwoven in one revelation. Healing is possible only because disharmony was never real. The power of the word shines only when we see that presence is not future, but now. The recognition that all is already whole removes the need to ask or to wait. The circle closes. There is no disease to heal. No future to conquer. No distance to cross. Only divine reality, manifesting in many forms, always perfect, always present. And the impact of this understanding reaches far beyond personal life. It threatens the very logic of society, built on belief in separation, in lack, in time. Entire systems, from medicine to institutional religion, from economies of scarcity to ideologies of endless progress, depend on that belief. But when it dissolves, the individual is no longer a hostage. No longer bound to promises of a better tomorrow, because fullness is already here. No longer giving power to outside authorities, because presence reveals itself in one's own awareness. This is the true silent revolution, the discovery that separation never existed. The recognition that there is no distance between God and man transforms not only spiritual vision, but the lived experience of life itself. And this understanding reaches far beyond healing disease or easing anxiety. It unmasks the hidden machinery that sustains institutions, collective beliefs, even the pillars of modern culture. When unity is perceived as fact, every aspect of existence is illuminated with new light. Its first impact is seen in how we view the body. Culture teaches us that the body is a fragile organism, subject to accident, disease, aging. And this vision breeds a life of anxiety, checkups, medicines, insurances. But when one realizes that true identity was never born and can never die, the body is no longer the final measure. It is seen as a temporary expression of the eternal. This does not mean neglecting health or rejecting medicine, but it strips them of absolute authority. The body ceases to be a prison or a weakness, and becomes a vessel, through which divine life reveals itself. The second impact is on our sense of time. Ordinary thought is trapped in cycles of expectation: work today to earn tomorrow, suffer now to gain later, endlessly improve toward some final point. This logic rules religions, politics, economies. But when one realizes perfection is the absolute now, the future loses its weight. Life stops being consumed by waiting, and becomes contemplation. The third impact is on suffering itself. Pain, lack, conflict, they seem real, but in spiritual light are revealed as errors of perception. Pain is experienced as sensation, but it has no substance, like a shadow that only exists while believed in. When we stop granting it power, transformation happens. Suffering is not denied, but it is stripped of its throne. The practitioner faces challenges differently, not fighting them as external forces, but holding to the vision of reality's untouched essence. And these consequences reach into society itself. Religions are built on belief in a distant God, offering mediators to bridge the gap. But if unity is fact, that model collapses. External mediation loses its meaning. That is why this teaching destabilizes systems grounded in the illusion of separation. The same logic applies to economics. Capitalism rests on the idea of scarcity: something is missing, and to have it we must produce, compete, accumulate. But if real lack does not exist, if the substance of life is infinite, then the logic of scarcity loses credibility. The human being is no longer a permanent consumer, but an expression of fullness. Relationships too are transformed. A culture of separation teaches that each person is an isolated self, searching in another for completion and validation. This dynamic breeds fear and dependence. But if each one is an expression of the whole, relationships become reflections of unity. Love ceases to be a search for what is missing, it becomes recognition. And the deepest effect is in spiritual practice. Enlightenment is no longer a distant goal for the few. There are no stages to climb, no merits to accumulate. Enlightenment is simply the recognition of what already is. This revelation is both liberating and unsettling. It ends the endless chase for spiritual achievement. It unsettles the ego, because it strips away its favorite story, that it is on a journey to become something greater. The ego does not want to hear there was never a journey, that one has always been home. Such a shift demands courage, for it dismantles the very structures of identity. Without the illusion of separation, many long-cherished practices lose their justification. No more promises, no more bargains, no formulas of magic. Spirituality cannot be used as currency. The only true work is to maintain awareness of unity, and let illusion naturally dissolve. The consequences are radical, yet entirely practical. Life is no longer driven by struggle to fix, to conquer, to attain, it becomes a witness to what already is. Far from passivity, this awakens clearer action, free from anxiety about results. When the hunger to fill lack disappears, every act becomes whole, conscious, aligned with reality. And so it becomes clear, this is not just another spiritual theory. It exposes the primal error, the belief in a separate person condemned to fight limitations. When that belief dissolves, the world still looks the same on the surface, the body still feels pain, time still flows, challenges still arise. But they are no longer absolutes. They are passing appearances, laid over a reality that remains untouched. Here practical life and spiritual vision converge. Dissolving illusion does not lead to contempt for the world, it opens freedom within it. One still lives, works, loves, but no longer as a prisoner of fear or promises of future wholeness. One discovers wholeness already here, that they themselves are the expression of fullness, indivisible. This discovery transforms inner life, while quietly undermining systems that feed on belief in separation. If suffering is only an appearance, if disease is only mistaken perception, if there has never been a gap between God and men, what remains? The answer is both simple and radical: recognition. Recognition that the so-called isolated individual, limited, searching, striving, was only a mistake. And this recognition is not blind faith, nor obedience to dogma. Faith can be repeated, defended, imposed, but it remains a construct of mind. What is spoken of here is direct experience, rooted in inner silence, in conscious attention. Not acceptance of a theory, but observation, allowing awareness itself to reveal what lies beyond appearance. Why then do so few live in this perception? Not because the truth is hidden, but because centuries of conditioning weigh heavily. From birth we are taught to believe we are fragile bodies, forced to struggle in a hostile world. This narrative is reinforced by religion, by education, even by language. To be free means to unlearn it, to disarm the mind, to let silence replace the flood of thought. It is simple in essence, yet difficult, because it confronts identity itself, built over a lifetime. But in that confrontation, illusion loses power. The moment one allows stillness, even for an instant, presence is revealed, presence that does not depend on time, space, or circumstance. It needs no creation, it already is. The work is only to quiet the inner voices that project lack, fear, expectation. This is not a mental exercise, but immersion into the very source of awareness. And here lies the true provocation: if perfection is already present, what need is there to organize life around future promises? What role remains for institutions that demand obedience in exchange for salvation? What value for systems that feed on the sense of lack? At stake is not only personal transformation, but the recognition that entire structures of society are built upon a fundamental lie. Unity is a fact. But until it is recognized, humanity continues to live as though enslaved by separation. This teaching does not promise a life without trials. Pain and loss will come, but they no longer stand as forces that define existence. Suffering is stripped of its throne and revealed as a passing appearance. And this change of perspective is what allows us to walk through pain without being broken. A person no longer sees themselves as a victim of circumstance, but as a witness of reality, untouched, unshaken. This is the deepest liberation, to live in the world without being its prisoner. To work, to love, to carry out duties, but without fear, and without hope endlessly postponed into the future. To live from the recognition that fullness does not depend on time, effort, or achievement. To live knowing that what you truly are was never born and will never die. This recognition cannot be reached by intellect alone. It requires subtle inner work. Meditation arises here not as a technique, but as the undoing of all techniques, the silencing of mental noise until only presence remains. The paradox is this: the mind that seeks enlightenment is the very obstacle to it. The flash of recognition, that unmistakable moment when unity reveals itself as obvious, cannot be manufactured by effort. It appears in the gaps between thoughts, in the space where the inner narrator falls silent. The masters knew, no conceptual refinement can replace the direct encounter of consciousness with itself. Every true tradition, in the end, comes to the same instruction: sit down, be still, and observe what remains when all mental constructions dissolve. And the consequences of this vision reach far beyond personal transformation. If unity is indeed the fundamental nature of reality, then every system built on division, from religious hierarchies to economic models of scarcity, is unmasked as fiction. The question is no longer whether this is true, but whether humanity will allow itself to recognize it. The architecture of civilization rests upon the illusion this teaching dissolves. Yet change begins with awareness of one's own role as co-creator. And the only way to join with this divine mind is through meditation. If this message has resonated with you, share your reflections in the comments below.